The sun had just begun its slow crawl over the horizon, tinting the rugged mesas and desert sands with a faint blush of gold. The air was dry, sharp, and still, the kind of morning where every sound seemed magnified, every shadow more threatening. In the quiet, a single figure stood alone atop a ridge, silhouetted against the awakening sky. He was a tall man, dust-covered and weather-beaten, with a dark hat pulled low over eyes as hard as flint. His hand hovered near the worn grip of a revolver strapped to his hip. Below, in the dusty clearing, a woman knelt, her hands raised in a desperate gesture of surrender. "Please don't shoot," the woman begged, voice trembling like a fragile leaf caught in the wind. "I'll be your wife. Just don't shoot." The cowboy's gun rose slowly, the barrel gleaming in the rising light. His voice was cold and low, edged with a bitterness honed by years of hardship. "You're brave to offer yourself that way, widow, but I ain't here for marriage." Tears tracked dark lines down the woman's dirt-streaked cheeks. She was too young to have seen the horrors she had, and her eyes burned with fear and something else, a stubborn spark of defiance. Her raven hair was tangled and wild, and her dress was torn, remnants of a life shattered by violence. "Please," she whispered again, voice cracking, "I don't want to die out here alone. I'll do anything." The cowboy's gaze flicked toward the small bundle she carried at her side, a baby, swaddled tightly, barely stirring. The presence of the child softened something in the hard lines of the man's face, but his grip on the gun didn't falter. "Why should I believe you?" he said grimly. "You're Apache, the same people who wiped out my ranch, my kin." Her body stiffened at the accusation, but her voice didn't waver. "That was a long time ago. I lost them to the soldiers. We're both broken by this land and its wars." He lowered the gun an inch, but not enough to show mercy. "You're walking through the devil's playground, woman. Ain't many come out alive." The woman's breath hitched. "I'm not asking for kindness, just a chance." The desert sun climbed higher, casting long shadows as a breeze stirred the dust. Somewhere nearby, a coyote howled, a lonely, mournful sound that seemed to echo the fragile hope hanging between them. The cowboy's hand twitched, fingers tightening on the revolver. Then, slowly, he holstered the weapon with a deliberate motion. "You got guts," he said, voice rough like gravel, "but don't think this means I'm your savior." She let out a shaky breath, relief flooding her features. "What happens now?" He studied her for a long moment, then nodded toward the horizon. "You're coming with me, if you want to live." The woman glanced down at the baby, then back up with fierce determination. "I'm ready." As they turned toward the dusty trail leading out of the canyon, the cowboy's eyes narrowed against the brightening day. The past wasn't done with either of them, and the long, unforgiving road ahead promised no mercy. But in that moment, two lost souls bound by pain and survival took their first tentative step together, toward an uncertain future in the wild, savage West. The trail wound eastward, a dusty ribbon unraveling through the barren expanse of mesas and scrub brush. The Apache widow, whose name was Ayanna, walked alongside the cowboy, her step steady despite the weight of the baby cradled carefully in her arms. Neither spoke much. The silence between them was thick, filled with the ghosts they both carried. The cowboy's name was Luke McAllister, a man shaped by loss and hardened by years of chasing justice in a land where law was as scarce as water. His eyes, sharp and unforgiving, held the memory of a ranch burned to ash and a family torn apart by war. He had spent months tracking the woman, not out of hate, but to find answers. As the sun climbed higher, Luke kept glancing at Ayanna, searching for signs of weakness or deceit, but all he saw was determination and pain. "What's your story, widow?" he asked finally, his voice low and rough. Ayanna's hands tightened around the bundle. "I was married once. My husband was killed in a raid. The soldiers came after us, too. I lost everything. My people, my family, ... She swallowed hard, eyes distant. "I don't want your pity. I just want to live." Luke nodded slowly, understanding the bitterness behind those words. He had lost more than he cared to remember. His family's ranch had been slaughtered in a raid, and the man he blamed most was long gone, or so he thought. "The Apache and I," he began, voice trailing off. "There's no love lost." She glanced at him, eyes sharp. "Neither side wins in a war like that." The wind kicked up dust, and Luke shielded his eyes. Memories came, unbidden smoke, rising from the homestead. Screams carried on the dry wind, and the cold weight of vengeance settling in his gut. "You're lucky I'm not the man I was," he muttered. "Back then, you wouldn't be standing here." Ayanna's gaze softened. "Maybe I am lucky, or maybe the desert just hasn't claimed me yet." The baby stirred, and she paused to soothe the small cries. Luke watched her, a flicker of respect growing despite the years of bitterness. "What's the baby's name?" he asked, surprising himself. "A petal," she said softly, the Apache word for water. Luke nodded. "Good name. This land could use more water." They walked on, the sun beating down mercilessly. As the day wore on, the past loomed over them like a shadow, threatening to swallow the fragile alliance forming between them. That night, as they camped beneath a sky full of stars, Luke sat by the fire, cleaning his revolver. The quiet was broken only by the baby's soft coos and the crackling flames. Ayanna watched him for a moment before speaking. "Why did you come after me? What do you want?" Luke met her eyes, the firelight casting harsh lines on his face. "Answers. And maybe, redemption." She frowned. "Redemption from what?" "For killing my family, for not stopping the violence sooner, for being part of a cycle that never ends." Ayanna's expression softened. "We're both caught in a war we didn't choose." Luke nodded slowly. "Maybe traveling together? We can find a way out." They sat in silence, two souls bound by grief and hope beneath the endless western sky. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, neither walked alone. The desert stretched endless, an unforgiving expanse of sun-baked earth and jagged rocks. Luke and Ayanna rode side by side, their horses kicking up dust as they pressed onward. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken doubts and wary glances. Ayanna adjusted her grip on little Apache, who lay quiet beneath the makeshift blanket tied across her saddle. Luke's eyes scanned the horizon. The desert could hide all manner of dangers, hostile outlaws, wild animals, or the ever-watchful U.S. cavalry. "You'll have to learn to trust me if we're going to make it," Luke said without looking at her. Ayanna's voice was steady but laced with skepticism. "Trust is a luxury I can't afford." Luke's jaw tightened. "Neither can I, but we've got to start somewhere." The wind whipped across the mesa, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke. Luke's hand instinctively went to his revolver. "Camp up ahead. Looks like a burned-out homestead." Ayanna nodded, her eyes narrowing. "Could be outlaws or soldiers. Either way, danger." They approached cautiously, horses slowed to a wary walk. The homestead was little more than charred timbers and ash, the skeletal remains of what had once been a home. Scattered bones lay near the fire pit, an ominous warning. Someone didn't leave here alive. Luke muttered, voice grim. Ayanna tightened her grip on her reins. "We rest here, but keep your eyes open." Night fell quickly, the desert cold replacing the searing heat of the day. Around the fire, Luke and Ayanna sat in uneasy silence, the baby sleeping peacefully between them. "Why did you stop chasing me?" Ayanna asked suddenly, breaking the quiet. Luke looked into the flames, the flickering light revealing a flicker of pain in his eyes. "Because maybe you're not the enemy I thought you were." Ayanna looked away, shadows flickering across her face. "We're both survivors of the same nightmare." Luke nodded slowly. "A nightmare I've been trying to wake from." The wind howled through the broken windows of the ruined homestead, carrying with it whispers of the past. Each of them was haunted by loss, by vengeance, by the unforgiving land they called home. On the days that followed, they fell into a fragile rhythm, watching each other's backs, sharing scarce water and food, and moving carefully through the hostile wilderness. Trust was still a distant dream, but necessity forged a bond stronger than suspicion. One afternoon, as they rode through a narrow canyon, a shout echoed from above. Outlaws masked and armed descended on horseback, intent on ambush. Luke drew his gun. "Steady and quick. Hold a pedal close. We're going to have to fight our way out." Gunfire shattered the silence as Luke and Ayanna ducked behind boulders, returning fire with precision born of desperation. The battle was fierce but brief. Luke's skill and Ayanna's fierce determination kept them alive. After the last shot echoed into the canyon, Luke exhaled hard. "That was close." Ayanna wiped sweat and dust from her brow, eyes blazing. "We're going to need more than luck if we want to survive out here." Luke nodded, a grudging respect growing. "Guess we make a good team." Ayanna smiled faintly, the first genuine smile since their meeting. "Maybe, but don't think for a second I'm giving up my freedom." Luke chuckled low. "Wouldn't want it any other way." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of red and gold, they rode onto unlikely allies bound by necessity and the promise of survival. The trail was rough, winding through rocky hills and dense patches of sagebrush. Luke rode a few paces ahead, his eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting trouble to spring from the shadows at any moment. Behind him, Ayanna followed, silent except for the soft coos of baby. A petal nestled safely against her chest. The days on the road had worn them thin physically and emotionally. Yet beneath the exhaustion, A fragile connection had begun to take root, tempered by shared danger and uneasy respect. But the weight of unspoken truths pressed down on them both like the relentless desert sun. That evening, as they made camp beneath a lone mesquite tree, Luke studied Ayanna as she prepared a sparse meal over a small fire. Her face was stoic, but he could see the pain etched deep in her eyes, pain she fought hard to hide. "Tell me something," Luke said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Why did you really run? What are you hiding?" Ayanna looked up sharply, surprised by the sudden question. She hesitated, then sighed, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's more to my story than you know. I'm not just a widow running for her life." Luke's gaze sharpened. "Go on." She swallowed hard, staring into the flickering flames as if searching for courage. "Before the soldiers came, before my husband was killed, I was part of something. A resistance. We fought to protect our people, our land." Luke frowned, skepticism creeping in. "You expect me to believe you've been fighting more than just to survive?" Ayanna nodded. "Yes, and I'm not the only one. There are others, some still out there, hiding, waiting for a chance to reclaim what was lost." Luke rubbed his chin, the firelight casting shadows on his weathered face. "That explains why the outlaws were after us. They want to stop anyone who stands in their way." Ayanna's eyes glistened with determination. "And I'll do whatever it takes to keep a petal safe, even if it means trusting a stranger like you." Luke's heart tightened at the fierce protectiveness in her voice. "I'm no stranger to scars either." She looked at him, curiosity mingling with caution. "What scars are you carrying?" He turned away, jaw clenched. "I killed a man once, not out of hatred, but to protect what was left of my family. Sometimes I wonder if the blood I shed will ever wash away." Ayanna reached out hesitantly, placing a hand on his arm. "We all carry scars, Luke. Some are seen, others are buried deep." For a moment, the harsh desert world around them seemed to soften, a fragile peace settling between two broken souls. But the night was short-lived. The distant howl of coyotes stirred them from their thoughts, a reminder that danger lurked always just beyond the FIRELIGHT. Luke stood, checking his revolver. "We can't stay here long. We've got company." Ayanna gathered a petal quickly, tension returning to her face. "Who? Men with no mercy. Outlaws or soldiers, I don't care which. They want us dead." As the moon climbed high, casting cold silver light over the camp, they prepared for the fight to come, bound by secrets, scars, and the unyielding will to survive. The desert night was thick with silence, too thick. Luke's instincts told him trouble was near long before the faint rustle of hoofbeats echoed off the canyon walls. He was already moving, weapon drawn, heart pounding. "Ayanna, get down," he hissed, pulling her low behind a cluster of jagged rocks. The baby's soft whimper broke the tense stillness as a band of riders appeared like ghosts from the shadows. Outlaws, led by a ruthless man named Cole Grady, known for his cruelty and bloodlust. They had tracked Luke and Ayanna relentlessly, determined to claim a bounty that promised gold or death. Luke's eyes narrowed. "We're surrounded, but they don't know we're ready." Ayanna's fingers tightened around Apache. "We can't outrun them forever." The outlaws dismounted, their leader swaggering forward, pistol gleaming. Well, what do we have here?" "The Apache widow and her white protector." Luke's voice was steady, but cold. "You're making a mistake, Grady." The outlaw laughed, cruel and mocking. "Maybe, but I'm the one with the guns." Gunfire erupted, sending dirt and rock flying as Luke and Ayanna took cover, returning fire with deadly precision. The night exploded into chaos, desperate battle for survival beneath the indifferent stars. Luke's revolver barked, picking off riders one by one, while Ayanna used every ounce of her cunning and skill to protect the baby and keep the attackers at bay. The desert seemed to hold its breath, but the outlaws were relentless, and Grady's men pushed harder, forcing Luke and Ayanna to retreat deeper into the rocky canyons. "We need a plan," Luke shouted over the roar of gunfire. "Something to turn this fight." Ayanna's eyes flicked to a narrow ledge above. "If we can get up there, we might have the advantage." With a quick nod, Luke scrambled up the jagged path, Ayanna following close. A petal cradled safely. From their vantage point, they rained fire down on the outlaws below, catching them off guard. Grady cursed and shouted orders, but his men were scattered and disorganized. Luke's voice was grim. "One last push, Ayanna. We end this here." Together, they pressed their attack, outsmarting and outgunning the outlaws. By dawn, the band was broken, the survivors fleeing into the desert. Luke slid down the rocks, breathing hard. That was too close. Ayanna smiled weakly, relief washing over her. "But we survived. Together." The battle had changed something between them, not just trust, but a bond forged in fire. They were no longer hunter and hunted, but partners facing a brutal world side by side. As the sun rose, painting the desert gold, Luke looked at Ayanna and the sleeping baby, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time in years. "We'll make it," he said quietly, "if we keep watching each other's backs." Ayanna nodded, her voice steady, "one step at a time." And so, with the desert stretching endlessly before them, they rode on to unlikely companions bound by fate and the fierce will to survive. The desert sun beat down mercilessly as Luke and Ayanna pressed on, their horses steady beneath them despite the long miles behind and ahead. The baby Apache slept peacefully, oblivious to the scars etched on the faces of the two who guarded her. Since the night they fought off Grady's outlaws, a quiet understanding had settled between Luke and Ayanna. The hard edges softened, trust deepened, and for the first time, the walls around their hearts began to crumble. Luke's mind drifted to the ghosts he'd tried to outrun, the faces of those lost, the years lost to grief and vengeance. "I've been carrying a burden," he admitted quietly as they rode beneath a pale blue sky, hunting justice, or maybe just a ghost. Ayanna glanced at him, eyes sharp but kind. "We all carry ghosts, but sometimes facing them is the only way to find peace." He looked away, voice low. "I don't know if I deserve that peace." Ayanna's hand found his, surprising them both. "Redemption isn't given, Luke. It's earned one choice at a time." The words lingered between them like a fragile promise. That evening, they camped near a quiet stream, the sound of water a balm to their weary souls. Around the fire, Luke shared stories of his family, the laughter, the love, the day the flames swallowed it all. Ayanna spoke of her people, their fight for survival, and the hope she carried for her son. As the stars blinked into existence overhead, their voices grew softer, the distance between them narrowing. "Do you think we can find a life beyond this?" Ayanna asked, her eyes reflecting the firelight. Luke smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "Maybe, if we keep walking this path together." The night air was cool, and as they settled in, the weight of the past seemed lighter if only for a moment. But the west was unforgiving, and peace a fleeting shadow. Before dawn, distant hoofbeats shattered the quiet. Soldiers, the U.S. cavalry, had been tracking them, intent on capturing Ayanna and ending the resistance she represented. Luke sprang to his feet, weapon ready. "They found us." Ayanna lifted Apache protectively. "We can't let them take us." The standoff was tense, words were exchanged, harsh and unforgiving, but Luke's calm resolve and Ayanna's fierce determination gave them a chance. In the end, it was a gambler desperate plea for mercy backed by the truth of their journey. The captain hesitated, eyes searching Luke's face. Finally, he nodded. "We'll give you one chance, but if you run, we won't." Luke interrupted. "Not anymore." The soldiers withdrew, leaving behind a fragile truce. As dawn broke over the horizon, Luke and Ayanna stood side by side, their shadows long in the morning light. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with danger and hard choices. But for the first time, hope was real, a chance at redemption, love, and a future worth fighting for. The desert stretched wide and endless beneath a blazing sun, the dry wind carrying dust and whispered memories. Luke and Ayanna rode hard, the baby Apache cradled safely against Ayanna's chest. They were fugitives of a brutal land, their pasts chasing them like shadows. But this time, they were ready. Word had spread that Ayanna was with Luke, the man who once hunted her but now stood as her protector. That knowledge brought a storm. A ruthless posse led by Cole Grady, the outlaw who survived their last encounter, was closing fast. And behind them, the relentless soldiers of the cavalry, unwilling to forgive or forget. The two found themselves cornered near a jagged outcrop, where the red rocks cast long shadows like the specters of their pasts. Luke tightened his grip on his revolver. Ayanna's eyes burned with fierce resolve. "We either stand and fight," Luke said, voice low but steady, "or we don't leave this place alive." Ayanna nodded. "Then let's make this count." The posse arrived first, outlaws like wolves, circling, guns drawn and ready. Luke stepped forward, voice carrying across the rocky valley. "You want her? You'll have to go through me." Grady sneered. "You've got guts, cowboy. Too bad it won't save you." The battle erupted like thunder. Bullets tore through the hot air, dust and rock flying as Luke and Ayanna fought back to back. Their movements, a deadly dance honed by desperation. Ayanna's arrows flew swift and true, picking off riders with deadly precision, while Luke's revolver cracked like lightning, each shot a promise to protect the fragile hope in Apatel's eyes. But even as the outlaws faltered, the soldiers arrived, their shouts filling the canyon. Luke glanced at Ayanna. "We're outnumbered." She met his gaze, fierce and unyielding. "We fight. For our lives. For our future." The battle intensified, chaos swirling beneath the blistering sun. When the dust settled, the outlaws were scattered, the soldiers forced to retreat by the overwhelming odds. Luke and Ayanna stood panting, battered but unbroken. "We made it," Ayanna whispered, voice trembling with relief and exhaustion. Luke looked down at Apache, then at Ayanna. "This land's tough, but so are we." He pulled a worn bandana from his pocket, tying it gently around Ayanna's wrist. "A vow," he said, "to protect each other, to fight for what's right." Tears welled in Ayanna's eyes as she took his hand. "Together," she said, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of fire. Two souls once broken by war and loss found strength in each other, promise forged in the wild heart of the West. They rode off into the fading light, not as hunted fugitives, but as partners bound by love, survival, and a vow as enduring as the desert itself.